What would you think if I told you that abstaining from ejaculation for weeks doesn't simply test your willpower? It rewires your physiology. Across time and across cultures, the archetype of the disciplined man, often the monk, the warrior, or the ascetic, has been revered not just for his restraint, but for the inner alchemy it produces. Today, neuroscience and endocrinology are uncovering what those ancient traditions observed intuitively. Semen retention, or prolonged abstinence from ejaculation, alters the male body and brain in profound ways. From a purely biological standpoint, the male reproductive system is designed for frequency. Sperm production continues daily. However, when ejaculation is deliberately delayed, something curious begins to occur. The Leydig cells in the testes, which produce testosterone, begin to modulate their output. Short-term abstinence can lead to temporary testosterone spikes, peaking around the 7th day. But long-term retention leads to stabilization. Not an endless climb, but a recalibration. But the more remarkable changes are not hormonal. They are neurological. Dopamine, the neurotransmitter linked to pleasure and motivation, begins to reorganize. In men who abstain, the brain is forced to reduce its dependence on external stimulus and high-frequency reward loops. This unregulation of dopaminergic overstimulation mirrors what is seen in addiction recovery. Essentially, the brain begins to regain its baseline sensitivity to pleasure. Natural pleasure, not synthetic highs. This is why some men report heightened focus, increased drive, and a renewed sense of inner vitality. When ejaculation is withheld, the energy that would otherwise be discharged is instead recycled within the body, reinforcing neural circuits related to goal-directed behavior. Psychologically, this is observed as increased assertiveness, emotional clarity, and an anchoring of presence. Not merely abstinence, but transmutation. Yet abstaining is not a simple path. It challenges the limbic system, especially the amygdala, where emotional impulses arise. For some, this leads to anxiety or irritability, as unexpressed sexual energy demands a new channel. The key lies not in suppression, but in redirection. The man who withholds release for weeks enters into a quiet confrontation with his own primal drives. The body doesn't forget its rhythm. Instead, it amplifies its internal signaling. Libido doesn't disappear. It intensifies, and that intensity, when not given its usual outlet, seeks new expressions. This is where the hypothalamus and prefrontal cortex begin a complex negotiation. The hypothalamus, which regulates sexual arousal, becomes increasingly active. But rather than triggering an automatic behavioral response, the prefrontal cortex, our center for executive function, can assume control. In men with discipline, this leads to heightened cognitive clarity. In those who lack structure or purpose, however, the unresolved tension can manifest as restlessness or compulsive behavior. The brain's ability to alchemize this energy depends on psychological maturity. Neurologically, what's occurring is a form of neuroplastic remodeling. Abstinence forces the brain to adapt by building new reward associations, often with productivity, achievement, or creative endeavors. It's no coincidence that in periods of sexual restraint, many report bursts of inspiration, deeper introspection, and even spiritual awakenings. The archetype of the celibate sage is not poetic myth. It is a neurobiological possibility. Physiologically, the effects cascade beyond the brain. Studies show that prolonged abstinence can lead to a subtle increase in androgen receptor sensitivity. This means that even if testosterone levels remain stable, the body becomes more responsive to its effects. This can enhance muscle tone, energy levels, and recovery. It's not magic, it's endocrine efficiency. But here's the paradox. Retention without intention leads nowhere. If a man simply abstains without directing that energy toward a meaningful pursuit, the system backs up. Irritability, vivid dreams, even nocturnal emissions may follow. The body insists on balance. Suppressed energy turns chaotic unless it is focused. So ask yourself, if you are choosing to hold back, what are you building? What higher function are you demanding of yourself? Because biology does not reward stagnation. It rewards adaptation, evolution, and purpose. Over time, this inner buildup becomes more than just a hormonal surplus. It becomes a behavioral pivot point. A man abstaining for weeks finds his attention drawn away from compulsive pleasure-seeking and toward mastery, if he allows it. His limbic desires are not erased, but recontextualized. The neurochemical patterns of reward are reshaped by his choices. This is the silent battle fought within the basal ganglia, where habits are either reinforced or rewritten. Behaviorally, this period can initiate profound change. The lack of release generates psychological tension, an internal pressure that, when harnessed properly, becomes a wellspring of discipline. Many men report sharper routines, greater time awareness, and reduced procrastination. These are not mystical claims. They are the result of sustained engagement of the brain's anterior cingulate cortex, which governs error detection and behavioral correction. When dopamine isn't being flooded through gratification cycles, the brain becomes more alert to misalignment. It wants correction. It wants purpose. Yet the shadow always lingers. For some, the drive to abstain becomes an obsession, turning retention into repression. This psychological rigidity can activate the sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight response, resulting in chronic anxiety, insomnia, or aggression. The nervous system is attempting to discharge the withheld energy, and if no outlet is provided, through movement, meditation, creation, it turns inward and becomes pathological. That's why physical regulation is essential. Regular cardiovascular exercise, resistance training, even controlled breathing, and cold exposure all help transmute the sexual charge into adaptive stress. These practices activate the parasympathetic nervous system, the rest and digest state, and balance the physiological arousal created by retention. Spiritually, men report a sensation of being more in their body. Their voice deepens. Their eye contact sharpens. These are observable behavioral shifts caused by increased vagal tone and stabilized hormonal patterns. What was once a fleeting pleasure now becomes a reservoir of presence. But this isn't about celibacy for its own sake. It's about regaining control over the most primal circuit of the male brain, the desire to spread genes, and using that raw drive to build legacy instead of waste it. There comes a point in extended abstinence where the biological need for ejaculation no longer dominates the mind. Instead, the man becomes acutely aware of his internal environment. His focus sharpens, his mood stabilizes, and his emotional resilience increases. This is not merely anecdotal. It is supported by measurable changes in neurotransmitter dynamics. Serotonin levels rise subtly during longer periods of retention. This contributes to feelings of contentment and a reduction in impulsivity. Combined with the recalibrated dopamine response, the man experiences an emotional equilibrium rarely felt in cycles of frequent release. This balance is regulated by the limbic system's improved communication with the frontal lobes, where logic and planning reside. The impulsive drive is now tempered by foresight. At the same time, Prolactin, the hormone that spikes after ejaculation and contributes to fatigue and sexual satiety, remains low. The result? Sustained energy, a persistent vitality that extends into how a man walks, talks, creates, and leads. His immune system strengthens. His circadian rhythm becomes more consistent. Sleep improves, and with it, memory consolidation and emotional processing. Even his posture may change. Elevated testosterone sensitivity and a reduction in neurochemical volatility enhance postural tone via increased activation of the motor cortex. The man stands taller, not metaphorically, but neurologically. This shift in body language signals status and confidence, triggering reciprocal responses in social dynamics. The biology of restraint becomes the psychology of leadership. But let this be made clear. Abstinence is not a cure. It is a tool. Without conscious redirection, the stored energy becomes psychological noise. Without meaningful goals, the tension builds without relief. This is where ancient practices intersect with modern science. Meditation, martial arts, creative work, and purpose-driven labor become the transmuting fires through which raw instinct is forged into inner power. A man who learns to delay gratification, not out of shame, but out of vision, becomes neurologically distinct. His mind operates not on survival, but on self-actualization. The question is no longer should you abstain, but what are you becoming while you do? Eventually, the man who masters retention is no longer reacting to his biology. He is commanding it. This shift is the hallmark of psychological integration, the alignment of primal impulse with conscious intention. It is here that the nervous system, the endocrine system, and the behavioral systems reach a synchrony that fuels long-term resilience, clarity, and strength. This state is supported by the hippocampus and orbitofrontal cortex, regions of the brain associated with memory, emotional regulation, and future planning. When ejaculation is no longer used as a quick escape from stress, the man is forced to confront his inner terrain. His emotions become data, not enemies. His urges become signals, not commands. And through this, he matures, not just sexually, but existentially. From a clinical perspective, the benefits of mindful abstinence, when practiced intentionally and not obsessively, include improved mood stability, enhanced attention span, better impulse control, and higher levels of subjective vitality. Hormonal patterns normalize, and the brain's reward system becomes less susceptible to desensitization. This matters deeply in a modern world saturated with hyperstimulation, where addiction to pleasure has become one of the leading causes of male underachievement and mental health decline. So what's the solution? It begins with reframing. Ejaculation should not be seen as a moral issue, but a physiological choice with real consequences. Practicing cycles of retention, such as 7 days, 21 days, even 30 days, can help reset neurochemical balance and restore cognitive sharpness. Pair this with strength training, cold exposure, meditation, and focused work. And the result is not just more energy, it's higher-order self-regulation. Set clear intentions. Transmute energy into physical mastery, intellectual creation, and spiritual awareness. Let the body build, let the mind stabilize, and let the soul align. Because when a man learns to master his biology without suppressing it, he doesn't just survive, he ascends.